Okay. Hi and welcome, Dr. Vincent Ogutu. This is Pauline Tiako with Original Consulting Agency, LLC. And we are here for the Diaspora Returnee discussion. Thank you for coming on board and willing to work with us on this. So I guess the first thing I'll do is to go ahead and ask you to introduce yourself to everybody, and we'll give you about 2 minutes to do that. Welcome.
Thank you, Pauline, and great to be talking with Kenyans in diaspora and returnees as well, I guess. My name is Vincent Ogutu, and I'm the Vice Chancellor Designate of Strathmore University, meaning next year from May, I'll be taking over from Professor Odhiambo to run Strathmore University. I'm really in love with this career of teaching, and it started when I was a teacher at Strathmore School, which is the high school that Strathmore is named after. You know, Strathmore started as a high school in 1961. So this is what I do. I consider myself a treasure hunter, which is somebody who looks for powerful ideas that could change people's lives in radical ways. And then as a teacher, I share those ideas. So I spend half my time looking for brilliant, beautiful ideas, powerful ideas. And then I spend the other half of my time sharing it either with people I'm teaching in a class, in an executive training, or in a session like this one where I'm speaking at a conference or where I've been invited as a speaker. So that's what I do. I collect treasures and I share them. And one of the things that I've always been thinking about is this whole idea of why do we have so many Kenyans out there? You know, why aren't they back here helping us to build a country? And I've looked at this question from so many different ways. And so I'm glad that you guys are having this conference and that you're even trying to address this question. So I've addressed it myself, obviously. And then I know a lot of people who've addressed it and gotten different kinds of answers. So I could try and weave that into this discussion that we're having today. So back to you, Pauline.
Okay, thank you. And congratulations, and we're looking forward to, you having a successful, transition, and all the best. And as usual, we're always here to assist. Okay, so let's go with the first question. The first question is, describe your career to include the decisions to study abroad and where and how long you are a diasporian.
Okay. A lot of it is random. So if you guys are looking for logic and reasons, I'm gonna be a big disappointment because a lot of my decisions are not the typical kinds of decisions. So my first opportunity to go abroad was when I was finishing high school, because my mother was working for American Life Insurance Company, which was under AIG, American International Group, and they had this scholarship for employees of AIG, where you could study in the States. And I was not doing badly in school, so I had a very good chance of getting this scholarship. So my mom told me to apply. But then I talked with my advisors back here at home, and they said, we need you here in Kenya, so don't go to the States, just stick around. We need all hands on deck. And so I disappointed my mom by saying, no, I actually don't want to go to the States at this point in life. Then she said, that's all right. The scholarship extends to a local scholarship as well. So I ended up getting an amazing scholarship from the Star Foundation, IIE. It was, handled by IIE. And so for the 3 years I was doing college in Kenya, it was fully paid for by the Americans with extra money for all kinds of stuff. It was a great treat. So I missed my chance to go. Then the second time that I went, that I did take, was when a Spanish professor here at Strathmore told me, have you ever heard of the Fulbright Scholarship? And I said, indeed, I have. Then he said, why don't you apply for it? I said, I don't stand a chance. He says, come on, I think you do, apply for it. Then I didn't. And then I took a holiday. I was in Mombasa, and he rings me up and says, the Fulbright scholarship application deadline is tomorrow. Did you apply? I said, no, I did not. He says, why the heck didn't you apply? Apply right now. I said, I'm in Mombasa. He said, make it happen. So fine. So I called my folks in Nairobi, please go to my drawer. You'll find my documents, scan them, do this. I wrote a letter of intent, blah, blah, blah. And long story short, I got the Fulbright scholarship. And so I ended up in the US. So I went to Rutgers University in New Jersey. And since I belong to this Catholic organization called Opus Dei, and hence my decision earlier on not to go to the States because they needed all members around to help with the work in Kenya, I said, okay, instead of renting a place in New Jersey, I decided to live in New York where there's a center of Opus Dei. So I was doing the opposite of what most Americans would do, so they would work in New York, live in New Jersey. I was living in New York and working and studying in New Jersey. So I would do the counter commute, perfect, because the train was always empty, whichever direction I went, because I was going the opposite direction to everybody. So I spent 6 years in New York, finished my PhD, and the deal with the Fulbright scholarship is you're supposed to go back home and serve for at least 2 years. And then after that, you can do whatever you want. So that's why I was saying you might not find my story typical, because it's not the typical story. Most Fulbrighters go back home, and some might come back to the States, but most will actually not, because they really love their country. They want to stay back there. Some might not leave the States, but that's either because they're breaking the rules or because it's a serious reason. So I met very many Fulbrighters from all over the world, and some were from countries that were at war, like Iraq. So they were given amnesty in the States, and so they just stayed on, and they're still there. So in my case, of course, I could come back anytime I want. There's always that choice. And I sunk a lot of roots in the States. I made a lot of friends. So I know the ins and outs, and I could very well settle there. But in my case, I've chosen to stay here. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's basically how long I stayed in the States and why I came back.
Okay. Do you mind sharing what you went to school for?
No problem. So I went to study. When I went, I thought I just wanted to understand leaders, because I've been fascinated by the fact that leaders are the ones who make decisions that could change Africa. My first 2 degrees, undergrad and master's, were in economics, because I thought economics is the way to go if we want to solve poverty. But when I realized it's the leaders who call the shots, it's not the economists, then I said, I still want to make a difference. And clearly, I'm not going to do that by being an economist. So I need to get into a position where I'm either a leader myself or I'm influencing leaders. And I was already in education, because I was sold on the idea that if you want to have an impact, you should actually influence people. So I was training future leaders for Africa, getting very talented kids who come to a school like Strathmore and try and inspire them to become future leaders themselves. And so I went to study how leaders do it. What is it that makes them capable of having people following them and dedicate their best energies to a cause? Like, what gives them such power? And there are many fields you can study it in, political science, etc. But I wanted to approach it from the psychological side. So I did organizational behavior, which is basically organizational psychology, anything psychological in the workplace. And I started looking at the buttons that leaders press. How do they motivate people? And then I got fascinated by the people. How do they get motivated? What buttons are pressed? And as I went deeper and deeper into motivation, I decided, let me go the whole hog. Like, what is the highest level of motivation? And that is meaning, when you find deep meaning in what you do. And even within meaning, the highest level of meaning you can reach is seeing your life as a calling. So if you see your life.
Oh, okay, good. Congratulations. So it took you 6 years to do all 3?
Uh, no. 6 years to do the PhD alone.
Wow.
Yeah, it wasn't an easy question to answer, because everyone was answering the question, how do you behave if you see your work as a calling, or if you see your work is a career, meaning you're climbing the ladder, the rat race, competing, or if you see your work just as a job, it's just something that gives me money. So everyone was studying how are you likely to behave if you fall into one of those three buckets. And then they'd always end the paper by saying, but wouldn't it be nice to know how you end up in those three buckets in the first place? Having either a job orientation to work or a career orientation or a calling orientation. Nobody was actually tackling that bigger, tougher question for the past 20 years. And I said, that's the question that fascinates me. I definitely want to find the answer to that question. And so that is what I did. I decided to study whether we are born that way, whether we are influenced to get into that. And once we've found a particular orientation, are we locked in? Can it change? Under what circumstances? So that's what my PhD was about. So as you can see, it's quite a vast question. And I decided to do it in using mixed methods. So I spent 1.5 years just doing qualitative research, interviews, coding, coming up with new theory, and then another 1.5 years testing the theory, using quantitative methods this time, so a different data set. So by the time I did these two huge studies and combined them to make a PhD, 6 years were gone. But I still think it was worth it. People think you can just go and get a PhD in 4 years in the US just because they do it in 3 years in Europe. But practically, it's not like that in the US. You know, typically people take 5 to 6 years. My classmates, nobody did it in 4. 2 did it in 5. 4 of us did it in 6. There's one who did it in 7, and there's one who's still doing it. So it's a long journey. And I have no regrets about the fact that it took so long because it opened me up in so many ways. I was challenged in so many ways that opened me up and made me the person I am today. So even though, yes, I was quite mature by the time I went to the States, I turned 40 when I arrived, but I still feel that experience in the US opened me up in ways that I hadn't been opened up before in Kenya, just because I was having an easy time in Kenya and not being challenged. You know, you're a big fish in a small pond. It's too easy. And then you go to a place like New York, New Jersey, and then I was meeting some of the brightest guys from all over the world. And then it basically challenges you in so many different ways. I didn't have any issues to do with race. Then I go to the US and you have to deal with something like that. And you become conscious of things you weren't conscious about before. And then you have to make decisions about your identity, which I didn't really have to make big ones before. And everyone there talks of finding yourself. It's not a question we ask in Kenya. You already know what you're supposed to do for the rest of your life. It's kind of like all programmed. But over there, it's so important to find yourself. And so I went through a finding myself experience as well. And through all these different hoops that I was jumping, I came to identify in stronger and stronger ways with the kind of person I wanted to become. And so just like in Kenya, they'll typically tell you, go find a job, do something sensible. Over there, if you say something crazy, people cheer you on. They're like, oh my gosh, you want to try and do that? Awesome. How are you going to do it? And then you have support groups to help you turn your crazy ideas into reality. So just living in a place like New York, where everyone seems to be doing amazing stuff, made me wonder, how come I'm not doing anything amazing? Until I started getting amazing ideas myself. And unlike in Kenya, where they'd shoot them down, over there, people were like, do it, man, go for it. And so it really gave me wings. And I decided, now that I can fly, where do I want to fly? And I said, in Africa, because it's home. And of course, I could live in the US and make a great living for myself and enjoy myself and all of that. But I'd always feel I'm away from home. Whereas here in Kenya, you know, why would I leave Kenya? Because it's not the most comfortable place on earth. What I want to do is turn it into one of the most comfortable places on earth so that I don't have to think of living in other places. You know, I can actually enjoy being back here. And if you're middle class, you can pretty much get a lot done in Kenya. You can be pretty comfortable in Kenya. But for me, it's because I told you about the 3 kinds of orientation: job, career, and calling. I'm clearly a calling-oriented guy. So what makes me tick is having an impact, changing the world. And so where's the best playing field to do that? Like I'm building my home into the best place possible or not, so that we don't have people dying on boats trying to go to work as a toilet cleaner in Europe as a better option to being back here in Africa. You know, how horrible. So we should work on making people feel at home, find opportunities here at home. And one of the beautiful things that I found when I came back, I was pleasantly surprised, was to see the same startup energy that I was seeing in New York and New Jersey. I was part of a group in New Jersey called Launch New Jersey, Launch NJ. And the idea was to build an ecosystem of entrepreneurs that would basically mimic the Silicon Valley dynamic and make entrepreneurs thrive in New Jersey. So I'd hang out with these entrepreneurs in New Jersey, in New York. So I'd really breathe that air of startup energy. And so when I came to Nairobi and found the same energy and so many accelerators and incubators, just like the ones I used to hang out in on the East Coast, I was like thrilled. This is it. So that's what got me to start talking to diasporans like yourself, saying, guys, it's happening right here. You know, you don't have to be in Austin, Texas, in Boston, in Utah, or the Silicon Valley, where all these hubs are of entrepreneurship. That's happening right here in Nairobi. I'm constantly getting called to meet techies, to meet startups, and I'm meeting all kinds of guys, people my age who are bringing their experience from the diaspora to start something here, and also just young guys. I have some of the most awesome discussions with my own students who have crazy ideas, and they know I'm a little crazy myself, but there's this professor who's crazy and will listen to us and will encourage us instead of saying, just get a job, just focus on your career, finish that degree. I mean, they find it kind of refreshing to talk to a guy who says, do it, man. Then they'll say, but I'll end up missing 2 or 3 classes if I go for that hackathon. I'm like, it's totally worth it. Do it. You'll catch up. You're bright. You know, you've got to experiment. You've got to try this stuff out. And so that energy is here. And I think if you guys have the know-how to start something back home, this is probably the time. Because if you come in later on when people have already done it, then you'll be coming to ask for a job, basically. But with the kind of knowledge you have over there, if you bring it here and you're courageous and you start something, then you're just when things are beginning and you have a head start because you have so much experience and especially self-confidence, which is what I think people here are lacking. No one's given them permission to do crazy stuff. And that's why I said New York changed me, because it gave me permission. And I saw ordinary people being given permission to do extraordinary stuff. So what about those of us who've been given extra gifts? Why aren't we doing amazing stuff? So if you have all those talents and experience, and hopefully you've got the self-confidence, because I tell people living in the States can either build you or destroy you. It can either make you really, really self-confident, or it can beat you up and you feel you're no good. You don't live an amazing life like other people. It can shatter your self-confidence. It can go either way. I'm just lucky in my case, it panned out the way it did and it empowered me. So if you're empowered, I don't know why you're playing in the little leagues. I've come to think of the US as the little leagues. People would think, oh no, there you're rubbing shoulders with the big guys. And true, when I went there, I was challenged because I wasn't challenged back home. But if you're trying to build something in the US, you have so much of a support system, you have, all these things happening. It's almost easier to do it. But then if you come here, then now you can do something big immediately. You could be the next Google. You could be, whatever, and you've got such a head start with the training and experience that you have. So I don't know why some people wouldn't do it, but I understand, if you've got family and all that there, you've sunk roots. My
So
6 years doesn't compare to your 20 years, obviously.
yeah. So generally, the question would be is that would your recommendation be for the diasporans to come back home and start setting up? Or should the idea be for the local Kenyans to go outside and be diasporans with the initiative and the thought process of coming back home?
You know, this is probably a crazy developmental theory that I have. If I was given unlimited money, I would make sure every Kenyan spends at least a year abroad and then comes back, just to open their minds, just to show them what's possible. Even something as simple as keeping time. Somebody who doesn't keep time will have to keep time in order not to miss the train. Just as simple as that. It's just that they're so used to the matatu waiting for you, filling up. You know, I have a friend who went to live in Spain, and the first day he wanted to go somewhere, he left the house and they were telling him, "Where are you going?" And he said, "I'm going to wait for the bus." And then they say, "What's that concept? Wait for the bus?" He says, "Yeah, I'm going to wait for the bus. You know, the next bus that comes, I'll hop on." Then they say, "Why don't you just check the timetable and know the exact time it's coming, and then you go at that time?" That was like a mind opener to this guy, because back home, we wait for the bus. No such concept in Europe and the States and Australia and all these other places. So I think it's really a mind opener for people to experience that life abroad. And then also it makes you value your roots. So I didn't really value my culture until I went to the States. Then I started seeing people saying, "Oh, I'm Irish American," and, you know, very proudly saying that. Then I say, "Have you ever been to Ireland?" He says, "No, not really, but my great grandfather came from there." But they're like speaking so passionately about it, like they're Irish American or they're French American or they're Polish American. And then they ask me, "What are you?" I say, "I'm a Luo from Kenya." It's like, "Luo, what's that?" Now I start explaining. Then I know so much about it. They're like, "Whoa, you know that stuff?" "Yeah, you've lived in a hut." "I have." "You've, you know, herded cows." "Sure." "You've, you know, been to bathe in the river." "Absolutely. Done that, been that, you know, done that." And suddenly I'm the star because I have roots like they don't. Like, I have real roots, you know, it's not like something from a few centuries ago. For me, it's like I know my grandparents. I speak the language. I understand the riddles and the proverbs and you know, I mean, it's a different ballgame. And so when you go abroad, you appreciate your own culture, and now you come back and you're rooted. So I would totally ship everyone there. Now, for the ones who are over there, it's your choice, of course. You can choose to either come back, which would be fantastic, or you can choose to stay engaged. So from there, you remotely help people. I know a lot of you are doing remittances, and that's fantastic. That's a great help. Some of you would like to do more, be involved in a project. Maybe you just haven't found someone trustworthy to work with. So those are the kind of issues that you go through. And I understand sometimes it's not your decision anymore because you're married. Maybe you're not even married to a Kenyan. And there are all these decisions, and the kids have grown up in one culture. Are they gonna find roots in a different culture? You know, it's tough. So I understand if some of you can't come back, but if the kids are still very small, I think Kenya is a great place to educate them. And if in terms of schools, yeah, if you're worried about the kind of education you can get any kind of education in Kenya, any. If you want like prep school kind of feel, sure. The kind of schools that'll get you into Harvard, into Cambridge, they're there. They're expensive, but they're there. You know, you want the kids to have a diverse classroom. We've got it. You know, they'll be in classroom with some guys from Turkey, from Sweden, from the States, from Australia, from Congo, from Egypt. We've got all of that. So if you're thinking, "No, you know, my kids will miss out," not really. We have everything. We have all those kinds of schools. So it's a question of just the timing. Is it too late to uproot them? Is it still early enough for them to come and experience a new culture? And one of the ways I've seen some guys doing is bringing them for holidays. And then suddenly they experience something they didn't experience before. So maybe in the States, they're a minority. And if you're doing really well, then chances are you're going to a school where they are the minority and most of the kids are white. And so it has a certain feel. And they come home and you see them imitating stuff. You're like, why are you doing that? And it's maybe because they feel inferior for being black, or they're trying to act white, or whatever it is, the hairstyle, you name it. And then you bring them here for holidays, and they're the star. People love their American accent. They're like an instant hero. And then they feel this is a different kind of feel. I'm a hero here. Like I'm someone everyone looks up to. And then no one looks at me in a strange way because I actually look normal until I open my mouth. Then they're like, oh, she's from the States or something, but and even then over here, foreigners are looked up to. It's the opposite of the US where you look down on a foreigner, you're not local, you've got an accent, that sort of attitude. Over here, it's like, oh gosh, you've got an accent. Like, that's amazing. That's beautiful. The only downside to being a foreigner in Kenya is that the prices go up. But that's something you can learn to haggle, So in my case, because I'm of mixed origin, I'm half Goan and half African, but I grew up in Kenya. So I happen to know Kenya as a Kenyan and also as a foreigner because I'm always treated as a foreigner. The first time guys meet me and they haven't heard my name. And then when I open my mouth, they're like, oh no, he's local. And the way we put on the red carpet and started serving him like a star, and then it turns out ni mwenyeji tu. Kwanza aliishi Eastlands, alizaliwa kule Isli, he's just such a common guy. But so when your kids come here and they're treated like heroes, it's a good feeling. They'll want to like do that again. And so when you tell them, we're relocating to Kenya, maybe it's not so bad, maybe they'll like it. I've got a friend from Ghana and he's been using that technique. They haven't moved back yet because one of the kids has a condition and special needs. And unfortunately, we don't have schools that are really good at special needs. So if you've got a special needs kid, I understand, you probably want to stay in the States because that kid could actually develop to have a pretty normal life because they'll be seen as gifted in other ways rather than as being handicapped, and then no one knows what to do to make them thrive. So my friend's son, for instance, is extremely good at chess. So he likes taking his dad's friends on. So anyone who comes as a visitor is challenged by this boy. And he nearly beat me when he was 9 years old. And I was like second year, third year of my PhD. And I basically ran away. I told him, I need to catch my train. He's like, no, just 3 more moves. And I knew he's gonna beat me in those 3 more moves. And I was like, no, it's a stalemate. It's a stalemate. It's a stalemate. And then I ran away from the house. But he was gonna beat me and I just couldn't take being beaten by a 9-year-old. Probably wouldn't happen if he was in Kenya because people would have written him off. But in the States, they realize, yeah, you have maybe a challenge in terms of how you relate with people psychologically, a bit autistic, but it also means you're a genius in some areas, which we will develop you until you're a prodigy, which he is. So thanks to him, I attended an Olympics. This was a Paralympics and he had reached the national champions. And I watched him win and we were cheering him and we were all invited to the Olympic village. So his whole family stayed at the village, courtesy of him. It's like him paying the bills. And I was invited as his uncle. And so we were there cheering him and, Olympics. So you wouldn't get that if you have a special needs kid. So there, I think staying in countries that have that kind of facility and understanding and sophistication, that's all right. Or if your health, requires special kinds of needs, I understand, there might be other reasons for you to stay. But if you're fine, everyone's fine, gosh, I think the future is yours to make. You decide, you can make it whatever you want, so like in the States, they talk of, the land of the brave. So I think if you guys came here, you would be you'd be having the true like American experience. So, you'd come, this is the land of the free and the brave. So you come here and you do your thing and you go as far as you want. And obviously these things can go either way. It could flop or it could succeed. If you're young enough and adventurous enough, come and try. Some people try for 1 or 2 years and then say, look, I'll just get a job. And they'll probably get a very good job with the experience you have from the States, So it's really up to you. if you're courageous, you're one of the few and the brave, then I think you can have a pretty good life over here. And it's also getting very sophisticated. So one of the things I learned to enjoy when I was in New York is just the sophistication of New York. So I got to love art. There were so many museums to choose from. I got to love music, and I'd get it even for free on the streets, summertime, people performing, or open air concerts or a special concert at a particular place. And I knew how to get this stuff. I'd go to meetup.com. Anyone interested in ABC, you just type it in and you're notified when there's an event. So there's gonna be a premiere of a movie and the actress is inviting you to her house. Boom. You know, there's gonna be a poet reading his poems at such and such a restaurant on Sunday at this time. So you'd think that you wouldn't get that here. That's changed a lot. So if you're in the right circles in Nairobi, you can get, you know, musical performances, you can get art, you can meet artists, you can meet, it's getting pretty sophisticated. Not as sophisticated as out there, but there are people here who are quite cultured and they have a desire to hang out with similarly cultured people and they have a way of finding themselves. And so, yes, you could still feed that cultural side of you if you've grown a taste for that and you feel you'll miss that when you come back to Africa. And then, of course, there's the internet, which, you know, COVID has taught us. You can always plug into any community anywhere in the world. Mm-hmm. And so it's not like you won't have contact with them. I made so many friends in the US. I'm still in touch with them. And yeah, so many ways to reach out and stay in touch with them.
Okay, good. Thanks for sharing. And I think the final question I would ask you is in reference to, you know, all the stereotyping where there's kind of friction between diaspora and local people. You know, how would you navigate that bridge?
Okay. They're just like you get a culture shock, or they tell you you'll get a culture shock when you go abroad. When I went to the States in the Fulbright orientation, they told us, guys, we don't expect you to get much of a culture shock coming to the US. You kind of know us already from the movies. We think you'll get more of a culture shock going back home. And to me, that was the truth. I wasn't really shocked about the US. Yes, it did pull me up and challenge me in certain ways, but I kind of expected that to happen. But then I didn't expect myself to change so much that when I come back home, I'm different. And so, yes, you will discover that you've changed, and that can cause friction when you come back home. You have certain expectations that are way above what is considered reasonable in Kenya, and you're gonna have to deal with that. Some of the expectations are stuff you can do nothing about. So for instance, I remember the first time a friend of mine went to the States and came back, and I told him, what are your impressions coming back? And he says, oh, the air here is horrible. And I thought he was just, you know, exaggerating and like, you know, he's just, I don't know. So when I came back, I just tested it and I was like, yeah, the air quality was not as good as New York, which is supposedly a big city and should be the one with the pollution and all that. But the air there was a lot better than the air in Nairobi, which is a lot better than the air in some places in China that I went to, you know, Shanghai, Beijing. I visited those places. And of course, Nairobi is much, much better. But yes, New York is better than Nairobi in terms of air quality. But it's not a gone case. I think we're in time to change that and to get rules to be enforced for cars to have filters and all of that. So I still have hope. But that's one of the first things I had to deal with coming off the plane, saying so much dust. I remember my first month in New York, I did not polish my shoes at all. I would just look at my shoes in amazement every evening and say, what, they're not dusty? And I've been walking the whole day, like, how's that possible? And I did it for a month just to understand what this new phenomenon was of streets being so clean that you don't need to polish your shoes. And then eventually I polished them mostly to preserve the leather, not because they were looking untidy at all. It's amazing. So there's some really trivial stuff that you might get disappointed about, and start setting a standard that no one can match, and complaining about stuff even you can't do anything about. So for such stuff, just get used to it. I remember I made a decision after day 2, after I came back, like I made the decision to come back home. This is home. If this is the air I breathe, if it shortens my life by 5 years, so be it. The minute I made that decision, I wouldn't think about it anymore. Like right now, I have no sense of whether the air quality is good or bad. Not hardly, I hardly think about it, because I flicked that switch and said, it's not something I'm gonna worry about. And and besides, I entertain the hope that I'll be one of the people making things change, making people conscious about the environmental impact of the things that they do, get policies in place and then enforced so that cars have filters and people grow trees. And I've watched the neighborhood I live in, Madaraka, transform in the past few years. And it's now beautiful. There's a nice sidewalk. People are taking walks, people are jogging. It's reminding me of New York. When I arrived, I couldn't do that. It was just messy. There's no incentive to step out and go for a walk. But now there is street lights, paved walkways and trees and birds. I mean, it's changing. So it wasn't like misplaced hope. Now, attitude. I remember entering a matatu and it was raining. And then he goes straight at a woman who's trying to cross the road, and she has to jump back off into a puddle. And I'm like, this is sick. How do you do that? Like, this is insane. And it's because over here, the cars seem to have right of way. Like, how? It's not humans. I mean, over here, people see a human, they accelerate in order to tell the guy, you don't even dare cross because you'll delay me and I'm in a hurry. So there's that sense of, I have a car, I'm more important, you stay where you are. And so there's that attitude that can get to you, and you can be really angry and annoyed all the time. And you have to deal with that. The way I'm dealing with it is I'm gonna be part of the process of educating people and trying to make a culture shift. Because for me, it's not something written in our DNA that we have to behave like that. If those guys go and drive in Europe, they'll change, almost overnight. I mean, they dare do that, the ticket they'll get, the way they'll be booked, the points they'll get off their license. I mean, they'll never do it again. They'll realize humans come first, and such things can be taught. And we've seen people in Rwanda being taught, not that we need like a dictatorial kind of way to get this to happen, but people can change, people can learn good habits. So these are some things you have to deal with. Then just patience. You need to be patient. And the way I put it is, don't be too patient, because then you become who you were before and you put up with everything. The only way you can pull the country up is by being impatient. Like, come on, guys, we can do better than this. I know you can do better than this. And don't tell me this is Africa. Don't ever use that as an excuse for me. Like, African time, or this is Africa. Like, no, don't blame the continent. Blame your own bad habits. You can overcome them. I've seen guys leave Africa and go and operate like the European, Americans, Australians. I mean, Asians. It's so it's not an excuse. So you have to have enough impatience to pull everyone up with you, but just enough patience not to exhaust them, not to ask for the impossible, because they're not going to learn in a day. And you learned pretty fast because the entire environment around you was pulling you up and telling you, you better be like this and conform or else. Whereas you're trying to do it alone, the environment isn't helping. So you seem to be this crazy guy who's fussy about tiny little things when the whole environment is complicit and happy with the status quo. So you'll need just enough patience to coexist, but you need to preserve a bit of the impatience, because otherwise we'll never pull guys up. So you need to have that as well. And then if you want something done, you'll have to remember that you need backup plans and things like that. Plan B, plan C, plan D, because you can't rely on the system. It's not just gonna work because it's a system. You've set an appointment, it's gonna work. You've asked someone to deliver by a certain date, and it's mission critical for you because you need those items for an event you're running the next day, don't trust it's going to arrive the day before. Plan to get it a week earlier so that when they don't deliver on the day they said, you've got a margin and you can basically make a fuss like you needed it today. And now they'll scramble and do everything to get it to you. And then finally you'll get it way before time just because guys are like that. So you've got to factor in some of the inefficiencies that you're going to meet and plan for it. Now, if you plan, yes, you can get things to happen. And then, of course, if you meet talent, like serious talent, hold on to it, pay whatever you need to pay, because that's priceless over here. So if you get a good person, talented, good values, good work ethic, hire them, invest in them. And because you're not always going to get that, and you'll keep getting people letting you down. So if you want to operate the way you operate in the countries you're in, then you'll pretty much have to build your own system around you, or have a backup plan and a backup to the backup plan if you want to definitely succeed. So, but once you've factored all these things into your plan, you can pretty much get anything done. You can do great stuff. And by the way, you'll feel appreciated much more than you feel in the countries that you're in. So over here, you will be appreciated. Don't come with a superiority complex either, by the way, just a word of warning, because people tend to think that, oh, I know it all. I've lived in New York, so I know it all. And then you try to, you guys haven't lived in New York, but you'll find some pretty sharp people here who are streetwise, and they know the environment better than you do. And the minute you seem like you have a chip on your shoulder, they'll put you in your place, and it can be embarrassing. So don't do that. So don't feel superior. Just come with the knowledge you have and treat everyone like an equal until they give you a reason to treat them otherwise. But your first assumption is they're my equals. I'll treat them like equals, and I will never treat them like they're inferior. I'll always treat them like they're at least my equal. And if you show them respect, then you'll work much better with them. So don't come with an attitude like I know it. Come, because people here have really taught themselves a lot of stuff. The internet has really opened them up. Someone might never have left Kenya and be pretty sophisticated already. So make no assumptions about that. So don't come with that attitude. But definitely, yes, you have a lot of experience that people don't have. So I think with those pieces of advice, maybe you'll have an easier time coming back home.
Okay. All righty. Thank you very much, Dr. Ogutu. We're running out of time now. We had 2 more minutes. So I'd just like to say thank you very much.